Welcome to episode 8 of the Triathlete Hour. I'm Kelly O'Mara, your host and the editor-in-chief of Triathlete magazine. I think last week I might have misspoke and said it was episode 8 or 6 or something, but this week we really are on the 8th episode of the Triathlete Hour. And we're talking today with Jesse Thomas about his retirement from triathlon. After unexpectedly winning Wildflower back in 2011, Jesse was a fixture on the pro triathlon scene, winning Wildflower 6 times, countless other 70.3 titles, and Ironman Wales, and garnering what he called crazy-ass fans along the way. Today, Jesse officially announces his retirement, and we talk about how that happened, what it means, and where he goes from here. If you're used to hilarious and funny Jesse Thomas, well, he's still that, but let me tell you, this episode is a lot more introspective than you might expect. First, though, we have a quick chat with another retired pro, our managing editor, Emma Kate Lidbury, who tells us about the gossip in Boulder and gives everyone a sneak peek of the new training podcast coming from Triathlete magazine. Be sure to subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss anything coming up. Now, here's the show. All right, I'm here with Emma Kate Lidbury this week, our managing editor at Triathlete magazine and a former now since you're retired, super good pro triathlete. And Emma Kate, so you're in Boulder. You're our person in Boulder. And obviously, we're based in Boulder. I'm supposed to be in Boulder, except for the pandemic. But tell us, Boulder's like the triathlon hotspot. Why is Boulder so big? What's the deal with Boulder?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a ton of triathletes here. Everywhere you go, there's somebody wearing Ironman gear or somebody out riding or running, and only as of yesterday swimming. So that's good. But I think Boulder has a lot to offer triathletes. Apart from the geographical factor of it's 5,500 feet above sea level, so you've got that, which is obviously one of the big pulls of why people come here to train and live. But you've also just got such a huge community of athletes of all levels, all abilities, and some terrific places to swim and ride and run. So I think it's a combination of those factors that bring people here. And then it's outstanding natural beauty that keeps people here too. And there's a really fun community. I mean, granted, it's not for everybody, but it's a fun place to be. I've been here 4 years and I'm not going anywhere fast.
I think you kind of went there thinking you were just going for like a training camp and stayed, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, I came here for what was meant to be like a 3 or 4 week training camp in 2016, and I never left. And I used to think that was a super unique story. And you talk to anybody in Boulder, and they kind of all say the same. So yeah, it's one of those sorts of places that keeps you here. If once you kind of fall in love with it, it keeps you here.
Yeah, and obviously we're based there because it's where everything is. But the other funny thing is because of all the triathletes, there's always gossip. You're always telling me like what the gossip is at the pool and the gossip in Boulder. And so last week when I said this on the podcast, Ironman is floating the idea of moving Kona from October to February and having 2 Konas next year. And you were like, oh yeah, that's all the gossip in Boulder. Everyone's talking about it. Yeah. So what are people saying?
Well, that's been kind of talked about for a few weeks now. And to start with, people were like, really? Where did that come from? And nobody, that's kind of part of the fun. Like, where does this gossip come from? It's kind of locker room gossip sometimes. But yeah, that's been on the cards for a little while. And I think there's a lot of some people who are excited about it and some people who are kind of terrified about it, because the thought of training through the winter in Boulder for a race like that is, when the snow and the temperatures that we get, you're going to have to fall in love pretty hard with the indoor trainer. But there's always a lot of gossip. I think triathletes love gossip. I think the fact that there are so many big squads here and there's, teams of people that train together, romances, breakups, all the stuff that you never really read about. I think we could pretty much launch a website based off of some of the gossip that you get out of Boulder. But yeah, some of it we'll print, some of it we won't.
I think Triathlon TMZ would have like 6 subscribers. I would be one of them, but I don't think there's an audience.
No, not entirely, but yeah, and I'm sure legally we'd be a bit stuck too. But hey, yeah, it's fun.
But you were part of the reason you moved there was you were on a squad, you were training, you were winning a lot of 70.3s, and you retired a year ago to become a full-fledged journalist.
Yes.
And this week's episode's all about retirement because Jesse Thomas talks to us about retirement. And so I wanted to get your take on, pro triathlete retirement.
Yeah.
It's I mean, some people I know retire and they still train 20, 25 hours a week, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, I didn't do that. Yeah, I retired, and actually it's interesting because Jesse and I, when I first moved to the US, Jesse and I were part of Purple Patch together. So it's interesting seeing him retire, and I've been following that journey of his closely too. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, for a lot of triathletes, I think more people than not, a lot of pros really struggle with it.
Okay.
It's a big transition. If you've been training and racing full time, you live it, you breathe it. You're not. Some of the best athletes do have balance. Not all of them do. If you want to be the best, you have to be extraordinary, and there is not a ton of balance in that life. And so then kind of transitioning out of that and trying to find balance in quote unquote in the normal world can be tricky. And your body and mind are used to working out a lot. And so like there's, a physiological thing there. I think there's a mental and emotional component to it. But yeah, a lot of people's identity are wrapped up in being an athlete too. So that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, not just for pros, but I mean, a ton of our audience, right? Like you are a triathlete, and sometimes it's hard to identify as like being more than, like, if you don't have triathlons right now because there are no races, who are you? What do you do? Yeah.
Right. And that's something that a lot of people get stuck on, I think, and it's figuring that part out. And, as we've written so many stories on over the last couple of months, it's all about the process and not being goal oriented and all that stuff that you read about all the time. And there is actually a ton of truth in it, but spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unique to triathletes. You hear about like Olympians after the Olympics, they have huge crashes kind of emotionally, mentally.
Yes.
Because what's going to top winning an Olympic gold? Like like that you peaked. Like that's so that's rough.
So it's about, so for me, I consider myself to be one of the very lucky ones in terms of, I transitioned from racing to writing a book for VeloPress, to this job. So, it means I'm still involved in the triathlon world, and it's a world that I always want to be involved in, but without the same kind of demands, training and racing demands that you become used to. So, it's super interesting. I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, and there's a lot of people, a lot of my peers from, a lot of the friends I made from racing who have not transitioned so well, and are still looking for what they're going to do next. So, Jesse Thomas was never going to be one of those guys, No. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. So, a very cool dude.
No. He obviously has like an MBA and a business and all that. But yeah, I think a lot of what we're joking, a lot of the triathletes become realtors in Boulder.
Yes.
That's the thing to do.
Yes. Well, I think also they're so driven and so competitive. So there are definitely, there are some key career paths that suit that mindset and that outlook and that drive. So yeah, I was just joking with you guys last week about there seem to be a lot of real ex-pro triathlete realtors in Boulder, but
they also all know everybody, right? So they can sell houses. It makes sense. It works out.
Yeah. That's what happens.
But the other reason we wanted to have you come on is because I wanted you to talk about your upcoming podcast. So we started with this podcast, the Triathlete Hour, and then we're going to be launching some more, spoiler alert. And the first one we're launching is going to be a training podcast that you're going to be heading up for us called Fitter and Faster. And it's going to be all the training topics, like every other week. And it should be coming next week. So if you guys subscribe to our feed, this Triathlete magazine feed on Spotify or iTunes or wherever, you will get notified of the new Fitter and Faster podcast. But tell us a little bit about this. So it's going to be helping people get fitter and faster.
Yeah, here we go. Well, I mean, one of the key things that we know about our audience at Triathlete, and one of the things that we know about triathletes in general, is that they love training. They love training, and they love learning about training, how to get fitter and faster. And so that was one of the key things that we thought would make a great topic for a great podcast topic, and really kind of start off with a topic and an expert, but maybe kind of dive deeper into some of these things that we read about, we're writing about. We're excited to get some good guests on, and
So like each podcast, you're going to take a topic, like whether it's, swim mechanics or bike cadence or heart rate, and then you're going to start like kind of broadly and dive really deep into that topic. And so your first guest, I think you've nailed this down, is going to be Dr. Stacey Simcha talking
Correct.
about nutrition.
Yeah.
So that'll be great. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Stacey's obviously somebody that has made a great name for herself in endurance sports, and over the last few years has really found that niche. I think her women are not small men. Topic is something that has gained so much traction, and it's so popular. And I think so that's something we'll be talking about in this first podcast. And I think people are very, very interested to hear what she has to say about nutrition and fueling and just and she is a physiologist, not just a nutritionist. So she has a pretty distinguished background.
For sure. And and then you're going to have new podcasts every couple weeks or every other week on different topics. So people should definitely like send in their questions, things they want you to cover. What are things that training things that mystify them that they want more info on?
Because I think there's so many things out there. We see in just the response we get to things like open water swimming articles or swim stroke mechanics or bike pedaling, bike cadence, heart rate variability. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, but we're definitely interested to hear from our audience what they're keen to learn more about.
Cool. So yeah, guys, make sure you subscribe to Triathlete Magazine on all the platforms, wherever you get your podcast, and you'll get notified. You'll get fed. What's the word? Delivered the new podcast.
Delivered, yes.
Delivered, dropped. The new podcast when Fitter and Faster comes out next week. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, EK, and I'm looking forward. Bet. Sorry, Emma Kate, EK.
EK is fine. That's my preference.
And I'm looking forward to the new podcast next week.
Yes, thank you so much.
You don't want to miss anything coming up on the Triathlete Hour. So subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. New episodes drop on Wednesdays. Now, the rest of the show. All right, I'm here with Jesse Thomas. Thanks for joining us from Bend, Oregon. We talked to Lindsay Corbin last week, and she said Bend is the hot spot now, the place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. has been for a while. It's a good spot. We're lucky. It's an amazing place to be an athlete.
You do your own podcast, right, with your wife Lauren Fleshman. So I feel like you're going to be a pro here on the podcasting.
No,
thing.
not whatsoever. Lauren and I pretty much just try to answer people's questions, like solve their problems without absolutely any like real qualifications to do so. So it's just it's just kind of us winging it. Actually, you can see there it is. That's our podcasting equipment right there.
Nice. Yeah. That's not what you're using right now. You're using like microphones I made you go find out of a box.
Yeah. Yes, the backstory. Yeah, it took at least 10 minutes for me to get ready for this Zoom call. But hey,
and I also want to tell people. Yeah, I feel like I always have to apologize too for like the technology and I think my husband's like riding his bike on the trainer in the background. It's quarantine life, right? So
yeah, at some point my 6-year-old will come strutting through the back and ask me for a snack or something like that. So sorry ahead of time if that happens too. Zadie hopefully will be in bed.
In bed? Oh, yeah. Is it?
It's like nap time. Yeah, it's nap time. Okay. Yeah, for the little one.
I guess that kind of answers what was going to be my next question. Yeah. How is quarantine life? I mean, you have 2 kids, you have a business, so it's a little different. Like a lot of the pros are like, well, I'm just training as much as I always train, but you have a lot going on.
Yeah, there were, before we were quarantined, there was still a lot going on. But yeah, I think that having the kids at home and basically not having childcare, whether it be school or like our babysitter. Lauren and I have a babysitter almost full time, 30 to 35 hours a week. And then Jude's at school about that same amount of time. And so not having that has been a massive disruption to our lives. It's definitely like first world problems, but it's been a massive change for sure.
Right. And how is Piggy Bars doing? It's kind of what I wanted. Piggy Bars is your company that you and Lauren run with Stephanie?
Yeah.
Stephanie Bruce?
Yeah. Steph is our other co-founder. Yeah. Piggy Bars, we're really lucky. Piggy Bars is doing well. we're not like crushing it, but overall we feel super fortunate in that people still want to eat food and
People still want to eat. That's good. Yeah.
people are surprisingly more active even than they were pre-COVID times, like when you look at most of the data. And I think because they just have more flexibility in their schedule. And then people are buying more online, just across the board.
Mm.
And so as a result of that, we're mostly direct to consumer business. And so our direct to consumer channels are doing really well. The rest of the stuff, like grocery, has been okay, but then like the specialty sports stores and stuff like that has completely died, which is understandable.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I was wondering, I haven't really talked to anyone, on the podcast yet who runs a business. So yeah, I
Yeah.
was wondering kind of how you guys were doing. That's interesting.
Yeah, we're really, really lucky, right? I mean, no business owner can plan for a global pandemic, you know? And so it just like stuff like that just happens. And there are some businesses that are well suited for it, and there are lots that aren't. And we're really lucky to be a business that's well suited for it. We have had to make a bunch of adjustments. Like I said, we had a big chunk of our revenue is gone from the specialty sports stuff,
Right.
but and then we've had to make a bunch of adjustments internally, like creating more space in our warehouse for our fulfillment staff to basically be able to go in there and fulfill orders without being around each other, and stuff like that. And then
All
all of
kinds of
our
like weird, yeah, specific regulation
yeah,
stuff, right?
totally.
Yeah.
But another part of just being incredibly lucky was that we moved into a new warehouse and office literally like the week before the stay-at-home order came in. And so prior to that, we were in a lot smaller space. It would have been really hard to safely social distance with the amount of with like our fulfillment staff that needs to be in there to ship orders out. So it was just one of those super lucky things that we got into this way bigger warehouse the week before everything shut down. And now we can basically have people on like each corner of the warehouse doing stuff really
Everyone's like
safely.
sitting in their separate
Yeah, I mean,
corners.
that's it.
Like,
It's crazy. We have Zoom meetings, all the non-fulfillment, like warehouse staff are all working from home, myself included, right? That's why I'm here, as opposed to being at the office. But then, yeah, it's crazy. Like we'll have company-wide, like all staff meetings, and they're all on Zoom, and there's like 4 or 5 people calling from the warehouse, but they're each like on different, like in different corners of the warehouse on their own computers. It's just it's a crazy time.
it is. It's weird. So it sounds like, I mean, from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like you kind of almost are more Piggy Bars employee business owner than a triathlete these days. Are you even a triathlete anymore? Like, I'm not
It
sure.
depends on what your definition of it is. Yeah, I think that I haven't formally announced retiring yet. I mean, maybe I'll just kind of give you the scoop right here, but I mean, there's not. It's like so silly. Actually, let me just tell a quick story about it.
Okay. Okay.
So the quick story of me, like athletically on the triathlon side, I went to my last triathlon was almost 2 years ago. Just crazy to
Was it
think about.
Wildflower?
No, it was
'Cause I remember Wildflower 2 years ago, you giving this like speech that sounded like a retirement
totally.
speech.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know that I was gonna, retire at all at that time, but I did that, and then I did Challenge Roth, right? That was my last
Oh,
big
right.
one. It was a couple months later. And what ended up happening, I knew so my daughter had been born, which is my second kid, 5 days before Kona the previous year. And I was already starting to feel pretty burnt, like physically and mentally, with the business and family and everything else. And even though I was still physically at least as good as I'd ever been on an Ironman side, was still kind of felt like, hey, it's probably at least time for me to take like a little bit of a break after, at some point. And so I'd made the
Right.
decision that I didn't want to go back to Kona. So I was going to do Roth, which was kind of one of my other big like bucket
Right.
list
Okay.
races, right? So I go to Roth knowing that I'm probably going to take a break after Roth anyway, some type of legitimate break. Have my, have a great like kind of career day there. Everything I wanted to have, like the training getting to there was really tough. I had injuries off and on, but managed to like pull out an amazing day.
You were
Um,
like third and went like some crazy fast time,
Yeah, I
right? Like
was
that's my
3rd and
recollection. Yeah.
7:54, like, I broke 8 hours. It was
Mhm.
like, it was and I ran 2:45 in the marathon. Like, I clicked all these big check marks that I had, like, professionally, athletically, in that race, and then, kind of, like, superfluously had planned on taking a break like I do after every Ironman or Ironman distance race, and then literally at the same time, we started going through the craziest and most difficult, like, period in Piggy Bars history with a
Mm.
huge, um, out of stock problem that was caused by us making a bunch of product that we ended up not being able to sell because the rice protein in it was, tasted really bad. And so,
Okay.
yeah, it's like
You're like,
I don't
yeah.
need to go into all of it. It wasn't like we didn't have to recall anything. There wasn't anything like that, but it was basically like
It just wasn't good.
it wasn't
Okay.
good, and at the time, we were switching from one contract manufacturer to another contract manufacturer, so we couldn't just, like, quickly make more, to, like, kinda cover
Okay.
it. So what ended up happening was, we made all this product at the old guy's place, and then it didn't taste good. We were like, "Whoa, this is bad. We can't sell this to people, but we're waiting for these guys to get up and going, and so we have to, like, basically donate this stuff to, like, food banks and stuff, but then also wait like 2 months until we have product." So we were just, like, out of stock, and
Okay. And so it was just like chaos
it
and you were
was
dealing with
total
that.
chaos. And
Okay.
so, like, the story that I tell is that I crossed the finish line at Roth at, like, I don't know, 3 PM or whatever, Germany time, right? And then literally at midnight that night, I was on the phone with our new contract manufacturer trying to get them to, like, speed up the process, after doing this Ironman, like my
Right.
best
You're like,
Ironman,
hey
whatever. Yeah,
guys.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like I was literally on the phone with the US, and it was just bananas. So like, going home from that and having our company be in like pretty significant distress, and then as a result, like it costing the company money and then it costing Lauren and I and Steph money because we don't have any financial backing behind the company. It was basically just like I really need to focus on this regardless, and it's kind of a good
Okay.
time for me to do that physically and mentally anyway. And so I did that, and this is turning out to be a way longer story,
All right. This is like a very
which
deep,
yeah,
involved
yeah,
story.
but which is okay. I mean, I did that, and long story short, I just haven't gotten. I needed to focus on the business for a while, and then I started the next year thinking I was gonna race triathlon, but I was gonna do a marathon to start, and then,
uh,
a flat marathon, and then broke my foot in prep for that marathon, and then have just basically been coming back from injury since then. So, that's
yeah,
the
I was gonna say, I
really,
knew you'd
really
been
long story of
injured.
how
That's a
yeah, of
really
how
long.
2
Okay.
years yeah, of how 2 years kinda stacks up with no triathlon, you know?
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you had been injured, and then I knew you were kind of coming back. You were doing like some different things, and then it's like obviously no one's racing right now, so who
Yeah,
even
that's the
knows what
thing.
anyone's doing?
That
Yeah.
and that's why I haven't been like, "Oh, I really should," kind of formally say that I'm, like, retired because it's kind of like I think most people would be like, "W j didn't Jesse retire, like, 2 years ago?" It's
Like,
kind of
wait.
like it's kind of silly. I actually have a blog drafted, that
Okay.
I didn't post because, I went to post it, and my website was broken.
Oh, wait, this is like the worst retirement story
Oh, it's
ever. This
so
is like,
bad, and then I'm just like,
yeah.
I don't have time to fix my website. I'm just whatever, I'll post it later," Maybe I'll just send it to you guys and you guys can post it
Okay,
or
good.
something, yeah.
And you guys, and we'll announce your retirement
There you go,
formally. There
that'll
you
be
go.
it. That's what we should do, yeah, but yeah, so it's been a wild ride. The last 2 years has been really crazy, just a totally different ride for me personally than the, like, 8 or 9 years before that, And,
Did you feel done though with triathlon? Like I was at Wildflower 2 years ago
yep,
when Rudy won,
yep,
like Von Berg, and you did this whole like big speech, kind of handing the torch off, and it
yep,
felt very like you know it felt like you were done. Did you feel like this was,
Yeah,
it?
I think I had and I ended up being right. I think I had a sense that that was maybe my last Wildflower at that level, you know? And, just knowing, like, there was a lot of behind the scenes there where my body, like, was breaking down. Like, I was still racing at a super high level, but, like, every week it was like, "Oh god, like, what's going on now?" Like, "What's
Oh
gonna
no.
be bothering me here? Like, how can I kinda work around this injury and that injury?" And also, um, really honestly, like, better support my wife while we have a young kid than I did on our first kid, and spend more time at home and spend an adequate amount of time in the business. By then we had 9 employees and we were doing a few $1,000,000 in revenue, and it was like there's like legitimate responsibilities, to do. So it was just
Legitimate
yeah,
responsibilities.
so
Okay, yeah.
it was tough. So I think I felt that um that race, and that's why I didn't plan on saying anything like that, but I think that those comments just kind of surfaced in the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. It was there was a lot of drinking going on because at Wildflower there's always a lot of
Yeah.
drinking, and I remember being like, "Is he retiring? Right? What's
Yeah.
going on?" So,
Yeah. I like to give super
why?
vague comments, I guess, at the end of
Right.
races, so
I mean, Wildflower has been a big race for you though over the years. It was kind of
yeah.
where you got your start. I mean, why is Wildflower such a race where so many athletes get their start? It's such a big one in a lot of people's
Yeah,
histories.
I think that it's one of those ones that's like, kind of this combination of, like, or at least for the last, like, 10 or 15 years, um, as Ironman has come to the forefront in the sport, it's a race that has simultaneously, like, a big deal and also kind of under the radar, you know?
Right.
And so it's this weird combination where it's like, if you win it, it's a pretty big deal, but it's also been it doesn't carry the same kind of media coverage that, like, all the big half Ironmans now, and particularly when Ironman put, like, St. George on the same weekend, right? And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
made it really tough where that's drawing the majority of the long course guys. But so I think that's part of it. I think it's also just a uniquely, like, difficult course where you can have young guys like I was, or I wasn't necessarily young when I started there, but inexperienced, and still do pretty well because there's literally, like, no group dynamic in that race, like, whatsoever. Because the bike ride is so hard and the run is so hard, it just splits everybody up, you know? And that
Yeah,
and
that makes
that
sense.
gives you more variability in who can be successful in that race, I think, you know?
Because you did come out. I mean, that was your first big win. You did. I mean, it's kind of like what semi-famous, but you people didn't even know who you were when you crossed the line after you won. You
Yeah,
came out of nowhere. You were like on a borrowed bike. It's
totally.
it's one of those kind of races. Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
What
it
made
was
you
a
think though that you could do that? Yeah.
I mean, I didn't. In that first year, I did not think that that was gonna happen. I remember the story I tell is that when I came off the bike, I was, like, in 11th place, and I thought, "Oh, maybe I can get the top 10," and then I, passed into 10th and ninth and 8th, and I was like, "Whoa, I'm top 8," and then I remember seeing, um, like Joe Gambles or somebody, like, up ahead, and then I was like, "Wow, that's 5th place," and then I saw Jordan Rapp, and he was in 3rd place, and I was like, "Well, I'm running into Jordan Rapp. I can't believe I'm gonna beat Jordan Rapp," and then, and it just kinda clicked on and on until I got into 1st place with, like, 3/4 of a mile to go, and I was just shocked the whole time. Um,
Is
but I think
yeah.
I think it's one of those races, like, you could be a semi like, the guys that are new to triathlon typically, that nobody's heard about, typically don't come from, like, swimming backgrounds, or they don't come from triathlon backgrounds, so they aren't good swimmers, and that was
Right.
me. And Wildflower is the best course possible for somebody that sucks at swimming, because the bike ride is like 10 to 15 minutes longer than a normal half
Right.
Ironman, and the run is like 10 to 15 minutes longer than a normal half Ironman run, at least 5 to 10.
I mean, you're like walking up parts of that.
You have an extra 25 minutes of racing to catch people, The swim is the same distance, and a lot of times the swim is a wetsuit swim too. So the swim is like you can be a little bit closer than a non-wetsuit swim. So yeah,
so it just kind of worked out for you, basically.
Yeah, I think all those reasons, like that was it, and I certainly had some luck, but and the fields were never like crazy deep, but there was always a good few guys there, with Joe and Jordan and Leon Griffin and Andrew Starkowitz and Terenzo, and there were guys that I beat there that I'm proud of, those races. So yeah, it was crazy time.
For sure. And that was kind of like, I mean, obviously that was your first big race. At that point, then were you like, all right, now I can make it as a pro triathlete. I've won something. I'm good to go.
I think I maybe naively thought that, and then in hindsight didn't really know what
in hindsight. Oh no,
or didn't really know what I was talking about yet. I think that it still took me like at least another year to generate like the sponsorship income that it takes to actually be sustainable in the sport, right? I throw this stat out all the time. Like, I think at my peak racing, I don't know if I ever made more than like 20 or 30 grand maybe in prize money, in a single year, right? And so what I tell people is that as a pro, it's all about that sponsorship income, like that's how you make it. That's how you sustain yourself in the sport. Although things have changed. I mean, they're doing this pro triathlon organization thing with Collins Cup and stuff. Then there's going to be maybe more prize money available to more athletes. But I think
I thought you were about to say, that you only had ever made 20 to 30,000 total in a year, and I was gonna be like, oh god,
no,
like it's worse than I think. Yeah.
No, I was really lucky. I was one of those. I've written about it, but I think that there's the curve is really steep, right? Like Jan and Sebastian and all those guys, and they're making really good money, and then there's a next group of guys that make good money, and I was lucky to be in one of those like kind of second tier, upper tier type of thing, and that was good, but it falls off fast. I mean, I think if you're outside of the top 30 or 40 people in the world, you're probably supplementing your income, with some other way. At least for sure on the women's side. Maybe men's side it drops out to like 50, but it's pretty shallow.
Yeah, I mean the women and men are pretty comparable in triathlon. Like they make pretty similar money.
They do on the, and I don't have necessarily data to back this up. For sure, all the prize money is equal,
Right.
But I don't know for sure that the sponsorship money is the same.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It might be now. It might not be. Historically, it wasn't. But I think there's a lot more, kind of awareness about it with agents and companies and athletes than there used to be. So I think that there's and I think female triathletes have done a good job too marketing themselves. They're really great marketing assets. I mean, but women are in any sport. So I don't know why it's taken so long for it to catch up, but I hope that it is caught up by now. But when I was there, at least like in the peak of it 5 or 6 years ago, it still felt like the men were probably making more. But
that's good to know. It's interesting. Yeah, I tend to think of the women as, Danielle is huge. Like the women are big stars, but
I think there are. I mean, you look at like Daniela, Marinda, like Lucy, right? Those guys are making great money. But like I said, I don't have any data to back it up, but my gut would be that it falls off steeper than the men do.
Okay.
That's my gut, but maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You're like, if people can't tell, by the way, hopefully it's equal. If people can't tell, Jesse got an MBA, and then it's like we're getting into like deep business talk.
Yeah, sorry. That's what that's my life now. So Yeah.
But like for background, yeah. So you ran at Stanford and you went and got your MBA and you were gonna like go off and make millions, have a startup,
No, I wasn't.
do the business stuff.
That was the reason I started racing triathlon, was because the economy crashed. And I say, if I'm not going to make any money, I may as well not make any money racing triathlon. So that's why I started racing. And yeah, the whole idea was like, I'll take 6 months and focus on it. I was consulting on the side and see how it goes. And then um, I think about 4 or 5 months later, I raced Escape from Alcatraz as an age grouper and finished 7th in the pro field. And that was
Mm.
when I kind of was like, oh man, maybe I could do this. I would have won $500 at this race or something, which, Alcatraz is so
Right, like doesn't even
bananas.
pay
It
the entry
wouldn't
fee.
even
Yeah.
cover the entry fee. So, but anyway, you start to see like little pieces of that, thinking that maybe you've got a shot. And yeah, and then it was actually just a year. It was 1 year after that next May that I won Wildflower. So yeah.
So was there ever a point then, I guess, that you were like, all right, I'm not going to do the business thing. I'm not going to go and be a consultant and make money. I'm going to do the triathlon thing. I mean, because
Yeah,
that's like a pretty big trade-off,
it
right?
is. Yeah. And it faded over time. I was lucky that at the point that when I started racing triathlon seriously, I had the education and connections to work, to consult and make like enough of a
Oh.
living, right, to be able to do that. Like I had an MBA, I had an engineering degree. I basically was doing product development and business development consulting like 10 to 20 hours a week. And that was paying me enough to kind of survive. And then it took me like a year and a half or so to start generating income in the sport. And that in and of itself is, I think, also uniquely quick. Like
Right,
I was
yeah.
really lucky, and mostly really lucky because of Wildflower, because it ended up,
Hmm.
not because I won Wildflower, but because of the kind of like the circus around me winning Wildflower and the way that I did created an interesting story that then was like rose my profile, I think, higher than it would have been had I just won some other half Ironman somewhere, you know? So,
Right. I mean,
yeah.
you've also always been very like open with fans. Like you used to write those like race
Yeah.
stories, and now you have like a podcast with Lauren. And
Yeah.
I think you even
Thanks.
talked about your vasectomy on the podcast.
I did. Yeah. It's a
Like,
great episode. I'm sure everyone wants to listen to it. Talk about aging, right? I mean, yeah, but that's, yeah, hey, if I'm just on to the next things that I'm experiencing, talking about them. So whatever
but
fodder is good.
did you ever feel like you were being too like did you want to be so open and so like for whatever reason it seemed to really connect with fans? You had a lot of fans. It seemed like they really appreciated that. Did you ever feel like it was too much?
I think I always, oh yeah, I mean, there were times when it definitely felt like too much. I think the reason that I did it was I've always been a storyteller. My dad and my dad's brothers, I mean, we just grew up like listening to them tell stories. And then I started telling stories, kind of mimicking him as I was, became an adult. And I had never really written much, like I was an engineer. Literally, like words are like foreign. I live in Excel, and so but I started writing, I think, kind of as a way to chronicle, mostly for myself, like the story of what I was going through as an athlete. And then people started reading it and they liked it. And then when you get positive feedback on the writing, then you want to do more. And
Right.
that's just that was really fun. That was actually the coolest part of the whole thing, like the winning races or whatever, like all that type of stuff. By far the coolest part of the whole thing was interacting with people through the storytelling.
Yeah.
That was really fun. And really the reason that became what it did was because of Triathlete magazine. I
Well,
was
you had a
really
column
lucky.
for us, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for one. Yeah.
Yeah. 50, I think 50 months in a row. I wrote that thing, which is absolutely bananas to think about now that I did that. But yeah, that was really fun. It forced it. I would not have written that prolifically had I not had some reason like that, to do it. And it just ended up being a really good way for me to find my voice and develop it, being
Yeah.
forced to write more and more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I think you ended up having a lot of fans. It's funny because Lauren, your wife, also has a lot of fans and is very popular in her sport. Do you guys have like overlapping fans? Is it ever like
Yeah, I
a
think
thing? Like, yeah.
most of my fans are just fans of Lauren that follow me because I'm Lauren's husband.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So she's the bigger deal.
oh
Okay.
yeah, for sure, for sure. There's very few like, oh, I started following Lauren because she is Jesse's wife, or I discovered Lauren through Jesse. Like it's quite the opposite. Yeah,
Okay. It's pretty funny. You guys are pretty, I mean, you've also talked a lot about like you were both very high level athletes, and you've also talked a lot about kind of like your relationship and building that together over the years, which I always find really interesting when two people are kind of at the both, competing at a very high level, very focused on their training and trying to get all the other things working in life.
yeah.
It can be hard.
Yeah, it can. I mean, and that's why we started the podcast, was because we get all these questions about how do we do that. And uh, I think that it's pretty rare that you have two people that are simultaneously pursuing world class athletics and and then simultaneously trying to be this primary support person for each other, right?
Right.
Most athletes, have a primary kind of, primary like pursuer and then primary supporter. And there's a reason that that exists, because it works really, really well. Um, but there are some other examples. I mean, Tim and Rennie are great
Right. I was gonna
example.
say I talked to
Yep,
Tim a couple weeks ago
totally.
about, yeah. Yeah.
And it's, so it exists, but it's really hard. It's a really different dynamic. And there's a lot of like give and take, because we're both kind of used to being the alpha, and like I'm pursuing my thing and I'm going to try to go. I'm going to world championships and it's really important. Well, I'm going to world championships is really important too, and so like, where do you draw the line? And I think we learned a lot about just navigating, and we continue to learn navigating relationships in general, because of that dynamic, because of the extra stress that being in those situations has put on our relationship. And that's created, I think, if anything, good fodder for our podcast, and
Oh, good. That's really what it's all about.
maybe
Yeah.
some experience, to rely on to help answer people's questions. So
Right. Right. It's really about good fodder for the podcast. It's
it's
really why you
mostly
do it
is,
all.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
most people listen just to, they listen for advice, but I think part of it is to hear us complain about ourselves, probably too, because there's something cathartic in that, hearing other
Right.
people complain about their own lives, or their own relationship problems. So it certainly helps
You've
us.
also
It's part of the reason we like the podcast, is we can kind of focus on other people's
complained.
problems for a
Okay.
little bit. So
You've also talked a lot about, I mean, just over the years, kind of in your columns you wrote for us on on the podcast, whatever, about, the idea of being pretty good at lots of things. Like you guys do a lot of different stuff, both of you, instead of being really good at one thing. Did you ever think like if you didn't have, the business and like all this other stuff going on, you could have been better at triathlon? Was that ever like a
yeah,
weight, a balance? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think there are times when I definitely would have been better at triathlon, and maybe there are times when I might have been worse. And that's the way that I look at it. It's there were times, no doubt, that having the business was at massive odds with being a professional triathlete. Like, crazy amounts of stress, travel, crazy financial stress, employee problems, managing all that type of stuff. Um, yeah, customer expectations. I mean, like, if you discover that something is wrong with your packaging, and like, there's nothing worse than having to email like a few thousand people, like, oops, we fucked up, and we're going to try to make it better. Just give us some time. Like, that's like the worst thing. So there are lots of things like that that added that for sure negatively impacted my ability to train and to rest and recover and everything else. But then there were also times that having the business was like a much needed break from training, like both
Right.
physically and also mentally. I think it kept me, although I certainly did overtrain at times in my career. I think it kept me from chronically overtraining, because just I didn't there was no way I was going to do a 40-hour training week. Like there was no way I was going to Ben Hoffman or Jan Frodeno my way into Kona. Like I had to be at the office. Like I had other responsibilities that I couldn't just completely bug out on, and so I couldn't keep my life like just unilaterally focused on triathlon pretty much ever during my career. And I think that ended up being good for me in a lot of ways. Like I said, avoided overtraining. I found more kind of like joy in the sport as a counterbalance to business, and then more joy in business as a counterbalance to sport. So yeah, it was a real mix. I wouldn't have had it any other way. And now that I'm kind of more or less done, it's really nice to have something that I can sink my teeth into as passionately as I did racing, which I think is very rare as well for pro athletes. There tends to be
Right.
this like big coming down of you're like, man, the last like 5, 10, 15, whatever years I was like had this huge goal every year, every whatever, and it was like very public and it was very like I was very passionate about it, and it mattered to me and it mattered to everybody else. And you get all this like amazing kind of feedback from that on how like quote unquote important your life is and your pursuits. And I think it can be really hard for athletes when they switch out of that into like more normal life and work and stuff
Into
like
more
that.
normal life.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm lucky in that we've got Piggy Bars, and I'm just as passionate about Piggy Bars as I was my triathlon career. And in a lot of ways, I think more so because it can actually, the success of Piggy Bars can definitely have a greater positive impact than any success I had in triathlon on my family, on my community, the people that I care about. So, so it's pretty cool to have that.
So you feel good about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I do.
That's good. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. We want you to feel good
No, thanks.
about your
Yeah.
whole career.
Yeah, thank you.
So if you were gonna now that we've like officially announced you retired, or if you
Yeah.
were looking back, what would you say was like your best favorite moment and like your worst one?
Okay, I'll just go with the two that popped into my head. I mean,
Okay.
winning the first wild, there's a few. The best one is tough. I can't name just one.
Okay.
The first Wildflower was huge. The second Wildflower was also huge because I was like really doubting myself going into that race, because just kind of like it was a fluke that I won the first one.
Right.
And there was a lot of pressure there. I was on the cover of Triathlete magazine, and it was just like, oh my God, what has happened? And that one was amazing. But I mean, I joke about this a little bit with him, but beating Jan Frodeno at Ironman Lanzarote is something like I'll for sure never forget. In fact, the moment, if you
Okay.
ask about a moment, the moment of passing him on the run is a moment I'll never forget. And he was
You're like putting that down in history as okay.
super classy. I mean, he was coming off of like a 4-month break. It was like a training race for him, but as I get older, I will, change that and say that he was in the best shape of his life. And,
Right.
I beat him at an Ironman, but that was an amazing moment too. Worst moment, getting getting a slotting penalty at the Ironman World Championships that half Ironman World Championships in 2015. Because I was in no doubt the best shape of my life, or best half Ironman shape of my life, and I think I was a top 5 guy that day, and that was a bummer. That would have been my best performance ever at a world champ. I came off the bike in 5th and then had to sit there for 4 minutes
And watch everybody go by, right?
pass me. Yeah. So that was definitely my biggest down moment for sure. But then it was 2 weeks later that I just ran, I jumped in an Ironman and that started my whole Ironman thing. So it's kind of
Oh,
crazy how
yeah.
it worked
You just
out.
did Wales, like,
I
on
did.
a
I was
whim.
literally over there and we were like, I had signed up as kind of like a backup, like a couple weeks before.
Right.
And Matt was just like, just go do it. We'll just do it on half Ironman training and just see how it goes. And, that started my whole Ironman thing. So it was nuts.
Okay. You're like in things that we like don't recommend people do.
Yeah. Well, and
Right.
had I gotten 5th at the half Ironman World Championships, I would not have done Wales. Like
Yeah.
there's no doubt. Like I would have been like, why the hell would I do Wales? I just got 5th at the half Ironman World Championships. Go do whatever I want. But anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you also, I mean, even though you're not really doing triathlon, you're still doing like lots of random stuff. I know
Yeah.
you're like mountain biking now, kayaking.
Yeah. Well, part
all
of
that
that is
shit.
because I haven't been able to do the things I want to do. So, I mean, I guess that's part of the reason why I haven't like officially announced a retirement yet is because I still feel like I'm still in the process of competing and like getting my body back, but just have had some pretty rough luck, for the last like
Mhm.
year or so. I was going to do a marathon because I
Right.
thought I had an outside chance at actually qualifying for the Olympic marathon trials.
Mhm.
But then the injury that I got there, I broke my navicular, and I've done it before, unfortunately, and it takes a year to recover from. And that year, it has just now gone by. So I've been doing some biking and a little bit of running here and there, but I've also have this other injury that actually happened in 2018 in the lead up to Roth that has hung around, and like every time I kind of feel like it's gone, it's kind of back, and that's kind of what I'm dealing with, like right now in this moment, not being able to be as active as I want to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, because I was like, I know you were still doing like, you had like kayaking videos on your Instagram. You were doing like
yeah.
the pole paddle
I did pole
pedal, which
pedal
is like
yeah,
big.
I was just
Yeah.
doing a pole pedal paddle. I was doing a lot of Nordic skiing, which was great. A lot of like
Right.
last summer when I couldn't run and so I wasn't going to do any triathlon. I basically made like mountain biking KOMs more or less my like racing.
Oh, you're like
Cuz
life goal. Okay.
yeah, because it's like I never got a mountain bike before, really, when I was just riding a TT bike because it's dangerous and yada yada yada, and so the mountain biking was really fun because it was like I still had enough power that I could push the bike fast, but a lot of it was just me getting like more skilled, so I could actually move through the trail faster on the bike, you know. And so that's been really fun. That's been the most recent thing, and you know, there's enough. I mean, I'm in Bend, Oregon. There's a lot of
Right.
talent around here that, if you get a KOM in and around the trails in Bend, you feel pretty dang good about that. So there's a lot of competition. So that's been kind of fun too. And yeah, just finding some other stuff. But really what I'd like to do eventually is I'd like to get back to running some more. I'd like to do some trail racing.
Okay.
And then do some other fun multi-sport races like the pole pedal paddle. There's some other races that are like that around the country that combine biking and running with like skiing and kayaking or other kind of like outdoor activities that I really enjoy. And I'd like to do some of those too.
Are there others? Okay, because I guess we should explain the pole paddle pedal is like
Yeah.
this race in Bend where you like downhill ski, cross country ski, bike, kayak, and run, I think,
Yep.
right?
That's
I just know
exactly
my
it.
husband is like really excited about this. He like wants to come and do it.
It's an amazing it's an amazing race. And you do all of that like for the elites, it's like an hour 45. So it's a really like I mean it's shorter than like an Olympic distance triathlon, right? And you essentially do 6 really events because you run twice and kind of a main run and then like a sprint. So yeah, it's like you're never doing anything for more than I think the bike is the longest. It's maybe half an hour, and everything else is like 15 to 25 minutes. So it's really fun. But there are some other races that are like that that exist. What's the one that I always forget the name of it? I'm not going to remember it. There's
There are
one
a
in
few,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a one in Tuckerman Inferno is one that I've found on the
Hmm.
East Coast. There's one called the in Albuquerque or around Albuquerque area. It's the Mount Taylor Quadrathlon. So this one's
Okay.
kind of nuts. They road bike up. So the whole thing is up and down a hill, up and down a mountain, really. You go from like 6,000 to like 11,000 feet. So you road bike up to where it turns to dirt. Then you run like 5 miles or something like that. Then it turns to snow. Then you like teleski basically, like up. Then it turns to crazy snow. You put on snowshoes and you snowshoe the last mile to the top, and then you turn around and do everything backwards, and it finishes at the bottom. So it's just up
Okay.
and back. So anyway, shout out to those guys. I've never talked to them, but I just discovered that race looking for fun multi-sport races out there, so we'll see.
Okay. So it sounds like it's like weird random stuff. It's kind of what we should expect from you. If we were going to say like, what are your goals?
Yeah.
What should we see from Jesse?
My goals are to make Piggy Bars as successful as possible. That's my number one goal right now, because like I said, it'll have the biggest impact on my family and more importantly, my community. Like, it's based here in Bend. We employ 11 people now. We have thousands and thousands of customers. And as we grow, that's just going to make hopefully more and more positive impact on our local economy and community. And then also a really positive impact on our customers. So that's number one goal. And then number one goal is to be the best dad and husband I can be,
That's good. That's probably good to
I
have
was
that
going to
as your
say
number
number
one.
two, but yeah, professionally, number one would be Piggy Bars, but just really trying to spend more time with my family and my kids. I don't regret anything that I did when I was a triathlete, but there's no doubt that I was not as present as I am now, when I was racing full time and training full time. And that's been really nice, both for my son, who went through his first 4 years when I wasn't present, and then also for my daughter, who's just now kind of, just getting to enjoy me being me as she grows up. So doing those two things. And then athletically, I still want to, like, it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. I still want to tell stories, and I don't think that those stories need to be me going to Kona. I think could be a really interesting story to see what it's like for a 40-year-old dad business owner to go do the Mount Taylor quadrathlon and try this fucking crazy race, and like what happens, like, so I still am looking forward to doing those things, and I still want to continue to do that. It'll just be in, not so much of like a world-class level. I think it'll be a little bit more like normalish.
Normalish.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we should expect.
Yeah,
Is normalish. Okay.
Normalish, but still, I don't think normalish is any less entertaining, So
Okay.
that's kind of the hope. We'll see.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've been finishing up with like some would you rathers the last couple weeks, and apparently my would you rathers got like way too depressing. So we're gonna go back to like a fun one.
Okay, cool.
All right. So here's like, this is one a friend told me one time, but we'll do it for you. Would you rather only be able to eat Piggy Bars for the rest of your life, or
Yes.
or only be able, because I know you've raced in dinosaur costumes, only be able to wear a dinosaur costume for the rest of your life?
Oh man,
But you can eat whatever you want.
Definitely Piggy Bars. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have eaten more Piggy Bars than any human being on the planet, and I still eat them. I really like them. So
All right. So
yeah.
you'd
And
go only that, no other food.
And I've spent a fair amount of time in the dinosaur costume, and it's super uncomfortable. You would not want to be in that thing. You'd much rather eat Piggy Bars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Totally.
And yeah, I think it got very philosophical. Everyone thought Jesse was going to be a funny interview, but
Well,
it's been,
it's
really,
I'm aging, so I'm just really reflective right now. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Like I owe a lot to Triathlete magazine, and all you guys for everything for my career. So I really appreciate it.
One quick note. That post Jesse said he had written about his retirement and then never published. After we finished recording, he agreed to send it over for one last installment of his Triathlete magazine column. We'll have that up and a look back at some of his other fun old columns for us if you head over to the Triathlete website. Thanks to Jesse for talking, to EK and the rest of our Triathlete staff. Thanks to all of you for listening, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, keep training.